Robert and Di Elderton are my kind of favourite creatives because I think a creative needs to have their finger in a lot of different parts of the creative soup. They're music people, they're art people, they're wine people, they're fashion people. And they came from a traditional creative background, but it wasn't until they found out that you need to kind of draw on all of these different sides of your creative self and put that into your work that really helped shape it up for them. Di, I'm incredibly jealous of. She dressed two of my musical icons for photo shoots in Jeff Buckley and Regurgitator. If any of you guys are old enough to know either of them, hopefully. Their name Future Days, I should say, even comes from a German obscure rock album, I believe. And Robert's expertise in wine makes this a uniquely positioned power duo who've really put lifestyle into a cultural approach to creativity. And also you'll find out this morning that they're parents to two delightful girls and Rick and Morty fans. So please everybody put your hands together for Robert and Di Elderton. Thanks.
Last night I was called Richard Dawkins. I think it's okay. This is working. Okay, great.
Yes? Yep. Yes, we're good. Excellent.
That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
So 2014 was an interesting time for us. Actually, I'll come back a step. I'll talk about the Foundry brief that we received, which is about the journey, a professional journey, a personal journey. They're all the one journey, really. That's how Di and I see it. And in 2014, we were spent. We were absolutely washed up. We were tired. We were exhausted. We had been designing since 2006, all the things that Andrew had talked about contentious clients, about awful situations. We'd had some very positive situations, had all sort of culminated in a perfect storm in 2014. And I think a lot of things that had happened to us in 2014 was as a result of us not really being true to ourselves. And the points that the gentleman who was just doing the announcing? Tim said about our love of art, music, etc. It was really, had not been part of our heart, and that was at the point where we sort of hit this sort of area in our lives and we said, okay, so what are we going to do? So like all serendipitous moments, we'd always been enamoured by krautrock. Does anyone know what krautrock is? Well, this is going to be interesting. Okay, so krautrock was basically a musical movement that occurred post-World War II in Germany. Most musicians that came out of krautrock were the children of Nazis. The Americans, the Allied forces who had actually settled Berlin post-World War II, found that they actually couldn't manage Germany as a country. And so what occurred was that they took all the Nazis in internment camps, took them out, and actually got them to run all of Germany, so Germany ran efficiently again. And the children of these people were so incensed by the violence and the total carnage that had been wreaked on their country, predominantly by their parents, is that they moved through into a world of self-expression. And I had found, and Di had found, that in our life and in our professional life, we were holding too close to too many learnt ideologies, modernism being one of them, a range of other learning components. And coming back to the krautrock thing, they just basically went out and started doing whatever they could do. And I remember being at Pran Pool and reading this book on krautrock and being totally enamoured by it, and the name was Future Days, which is named after a Can album, but also this idea of optimism and also the sort of the vintage nature of it really compelled us. So in 2014, we changed our name to Future Days, and we really started to own what we felt was our future. Oh.
Right, that's going to be hard to read.
You're right, it is hard to read.
So really, I think reiterating a lot of what Andrew has said as well, every time we design a project, we try to approach it in a different manner. We don't like to repeat ourselves. I think that's part of trying to keep it interesting for ourselves, so we're not going in feeling like we're doing the same thing. We're not working in a corporate job where we basically have to go in, do our job, go home.
Mediocrity is not good for us.
Yeah, so it's to keep our creative juices flowing, to challenge ourselves constantly. I think when you've been doing something for a number of years, we don't plan on retiring. We plan on doing this till we die, basically.
That's it. Here we come death.
Yeah, I mean, you don't, there's no such thing as stopping being a designer or stopping being creative. It's about, you're not doing a job, it's a life. And I think design is about a lifestyle choice, and it's something that permeates every part of your existence.
Yeah, exactly right.
So keep it interesting, and do something different, do something challenging, and I think you'll see that in our work and how that's progressed. We've constantly tried to reinvent the wheel.
Who knows Dario D'Argento? No one? Mario Bava? Okay, so post-World War II, here's that post-World War II thing again. There was a huge movement in Italian horror, and Di and I became totally enamoured by it. There's been a remake of a D'Argento film by the name of Suspiria, which is sort of doing the traps at the moment. Avoid it like the plague. It's arguably one of the worst remakes you've ever seen. So this comes back to the 2014 thing where we'd had, basically our private life was watching films like this, listening to extremely esoteric sort of German and Italian bands, and we decided to incorporate this into our music. This colour palette is arguably one of the most stunning colour palettes I've ever seen. It's so free, it's so open, it's so not locked into any dogma, and that's the sort of things that we respond to in the studio. The underlying context of this film is just freaky, to say the least, and if you can get past the scene with the dog in the piazza, you're doing extremely well. I'm feeling better now.
Oh,
Warmed into it.
Good.
Here we go.
So we've got 3 projects to show you today, and we're just introducing our influence for each project. As you'll see, I think when I looked back at these slides, I think there is a bit of a theme. Everything's a bit...
Yeah, little bit of psychology in that.
Yeah, and look, I think someone said once that being a graphic designer, it's almost like, if you can look back, it almost gives you the beautiful privilege of seeing your psychological profile of your life. And I think that can be a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it definitely shows you who you are.
It's a cracker.
At a point in your life. So this was one of the first, I would say, daring jobs we did. It was, as you know, our background, or Robert's background, is in wine, so a lot of what we do has been based around wine packaging. This was a very small client, I think, at the time, and he basically came to us with, yes, we want you to brand the business, but also the price list. So rather than give him just an average price list to take out, he was a one-man band, we thought, let's give him something that's really going to make people stand up and take notice of him.
Yeah, so let's talk about that quickly. So the wine industry is, sadly, although not so much now, is, I'm going to be careful what I say here, in the past has been chauvinistic, and in the past has been male-centred. And I'm not sure, has anyone worked in sales here and gone into a wine retail store or something like that? No one? Okay, so it's a very tough gig. You have to walk in with a piece of printed collateral that grabs attention. James Halliday Reviews, for people who don't know, he's a well-known wine writer.
Yeah.
And these days, most wines tend to get within the vicinity of 92 to 94 points upwards. So in my head, I go, well, that's not really a context in order to create difference in terms of differentiating product. We knew we had this situation because I'd seen it myself. I was, many years ago, I was a sales rep in the wine industry, where if you did not walk in with something that had visual impact, you were just going to lose the game. And then it's just a process of playing catch-up as relationship building in terms of the relationship between the sales manager or the area manager and the retailer in order to sell some wine. So this is what we came to.
The inspiration was, I don't know if people have heard of Guy Baudin, the photographer. His work, particularly a series of photos that he did for Charles Jourdan's shoes in the 70s. Shoes are another obsession. But he did this. I think the thing I like about his work and that we were most captivated by was everything is almost a little surreal and you don't actually know what's going on in a lot of the imagery. So we then worked with a very well-known Melbourne photographer, Earl Carter, who pops up quite a bit in our presentation today. And we commissioned him to, do some photos of women, but in this case, women's hands, or never really showing a face, in order to be suggestive of perhaps an incident that was occurring or...
And power.
Yeah, and I don't think we set out to make the women look like powerful women, but when we look back at this, I think the client said, you'd like to take them out for dinner, but they'd probably kill you afterwards.
Kill you and empty your wallet.
Yeah. So,
which the next one identifies extremely well.
So to say this made an impact when he was taking... the price list around was an understatement. So I think it terrified a lot of people, but...
It was extraordinary.
But a lot of people loved it and how we designed these price lists was that they folded up, but they could then be used as a poster, which I think a lot of people did do.
It was a very... Andrew talks about strategy and that's very much Andrew's thing. For us, it's a little bit more intuitive. There's a place for everyone in the world. This, for us, was about, we had a small wine company. He needed to be $1 million in turnover. He needed to get there quickly. He was on the phone all the time. He was resource poor. How did we get that impact? And we certainly got that impact with this. People started talking about these price lists. I think one was thrown at him when he walked in one afternoon, which to me is, that's creating a response that I'm interested in, because we live in a society where everything is so measured, everything is so predictable. This is what, in our world, this is the sort of work that we want to produce. The next slide shows the history of this. So this gives you an example of what the previous price lists were, so you can see the evolution of them. We used... I think a New York photographer for these. We had access to the archive. I just can't remember the person's name just at this moment. But I suppose the takeaway on this is just a simple idea, well executed and amplified, which is what we're interested in. Visual amplification can be very, very strong. Yeah,
and I think one of the main drivers for our work is always for it to change perception slightly. So if we, whoever we're working with, will look at the industry and then say, okay, it's done this way in this, and I think wine packaging and also wine distribution, it's very repetitive. Everything you see from people is exactly the same. They'll hand you an A4 price list with very little,
exactly the same.
with very little creativity.
There's no excitement in it.
Yeah, and so what you do find is when you do get a client who actually says, okay, I'm going to take the risk. In this case, because he was quite a small client, I think he was able to take that risk. He trusted us, he did it, and it was a success. So, another small client who we've never met.
We've never met him.
He lives in the Great Southern.
12 years, he just sends us briefs. We've never met him.
And I think our personal joke is that perhaps that's been the reason it's been such a long...
Best.
Yeah.
Best
if we
left.
met him, it might all end in
Spinal
tears.
tap, best left.
Yeah. So James lives in the southernmost part of Australia, which is the Great Southern in WA. It's remote. He's an amazing winemaker. What we started doing is packaging years ago, and then we got a brief from him he needed to do his website. And of course, we didn't think, hey, we'll just do a website. We thought, what can we do for this website to make it something that nobody has seen in the wine industry? So after talking to him via Skype for, a number of hours, he told us that he had 5, I think. He's got 5 different vineyards in 5 very different locations. So one is in Arab Beach, one's kind of in Parongurup, which is a really wild area.
A range of other areas.
Yeah, so they're all distinctly different. So that then sparked our thinking, and we thought, well, all of these places will have their own feel and their own
data.
their own personality to them.
And feeds.
So
weather conditions.
what we decided to do was we spoke to Earl Carter again, our favoured photographer, and we basically said, look, we're going to send you down there for 3 days and we want to see what you come back with, but the brief is we want the shots to look like something you would have seen out of Picnic at Hanging Rock, which is one of our favourite all-time Australian films. And what we wanted to capture was the foreboding nature of that film. Even though nothing really happens, it's terrifying. It is, you know, and I always find the Australian landscape is very foreboding anyway. It's just the light and the breadth of it. So, yeah, that's what we said to Earl. He came back, bless his little cotton socks, and said, I've got nothing.
Yep.
I've just...
managed, you're going to love this bit, and managed to
get lost.
Bog himself in the middle of a field and had to sleep in the car overnight.
Yeah.
And then comes back and says, I've got nothing. Well, we're about to show you a bit of nothing.
Yeah, so this was his idea of nothing. So he came back with these incredible shots of... Another aspect was that James spends most of his days, the winemaker, travelling along roads to each of these vineyards. So part of the idea for the website that was that we showed what he would see and his journey. It was never said in the website, but we wanted to allude to that idea, and for people that nobody really ever goes there. So wherever you were in the world, you would be able to see part of this place without actually going there. This is one of my favourites. This looks like, I don't know, serial killer material, I think.
We might segue into the website now.
Yep.
So this should hopefully fire and animate.
Should activate. So another part, no, it's not working.
No, it is.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, another part of the website that we wanted to integrate, and this was our first foray into using data, was that we wanted to capture the weather feeds from each of the different vineyards. So we worked with a now very famous web development team called Sons & Co out of New Zealand to come up with a way of incorporating data. I'm not sure what you're seeing on there now. Incorporating the weather feeds for each. So as you scroll through, you actually see where you are on the map. Yeah, okay. So you would have seen how the temperature, rainfall, everything actually changes. So that's a live feed that's occurring each time you go to that website. So I think that was one of the first times that we thought about data, and that's been a huge influencer on our...
Which we'll talk about
on the past
detail.
few years of our studio. So with James again, he came to us and said, okay, I've got these 4 project wines I need to brand, I need to label, what can we do? And the beautiful thing about James is he's extremely trusting of us.
Extremely trusting.
He just goes, yep, fine, yep, do it, sounds good. Which is rare, but when you do have that, make the most of it. So we thought, great, we can finally do something we've been wanting to do for a while. We're going to make these project wines. Is that working?
Yep, beautiful.
Yep. We had to name them too. We called them Flux, and we based them... has anyone heard of generative design here? Has anyone got...
Ah, good.
Okay. So basically what we did was we took the data... Basically, winemaking is a very scientific process. So all the data that winemakers love to talk about, but nobody else really cares about, we decided we were going to develop the packaging utilising that data. So we took the photos that we'd already taken with Earl, and we rang up a mathematician in Canberra whose work we'd seen, and we said, hey, we've got this idea for this packaging job, would you be interested? He said, yep, fine. He couldn't be more when
He
you
was
said
extraordinary.
cliches are real, and this guy
Oh, yeah.
is
with respect to him.
he's wonderful, but yeah.
Okay, so I might talk about the production on this because that's pretty important. Can we just
Yep.
segue through to the bottles?
Yep.
Beautiful, okay. So this, in effect, and I say this to this day, and I'm waiting for a lawyer to come screaming through the back of any establishment and say, actually, you're wrong. This is the first generative wine label in the world.
Yeah.
And this took basically 5 years for it to work. So we had spent 5 years getting the idea in our heads and working it up until which point in time where we found a place that we could do this, which was with Harewood, surprisingly enough. Now, basically what we produce is we produce 10,000 one-off labels that are never repeated. And the cost at pre-press from a digital format, the difference between one static label 10,000 times or 10,000 labels one-off was $250. So what had occurred in the digital print industry, are we familiar with Indigo presses, Hewlett-Packard Indigo presses? Anyone? Okay, beautiful. So when they were first released, they were actually rubbish, to be quite honest with you. They printed very badly, but they got better very quickly. And my conversation with Di was that these printers, which are worth into their millions, all the area managers that sell for Hewlett-Packard or Bambara or whoever the print house is, they go to their client and they say, well, yes, we can now print your label and it's going to be slightly cheaper. And in my head I said, well, that's not really sort of, yeah, that's a good result, but I thought, what's the other sort of narrative in this? And then I realised they were huge creative CPUs that we could actually do a range of sort of outputs with. And about 2 years prior to this job, Hewlett-Packard released a software package that allowed us to fire huge numbers of files in pre-press with almost no difference in setup time. So this job went to press, and I remember I was at Graphics Labels and I was there shaking like a leaf because I thought, here goes the career, if there's either flies or dies. And the print production manager came out and he just went like that with a roll of labels. And it was 2,500 labels and they were all different. So they were all reacting in real time to the data sets. And I thought, well, I just nearly lost it. So anyway, so this started to sort of gain traction around Australia and around, you know, the winemaking world, that these labels had been produced. And to this day, we're extremely proud of this because, you know, our thinking in our studio, and particularly with the wine industry, it's a very, very archaic industry, whereas it's had advances in viticulture and vineyard management, it's had very little advances in packaging. And so to this, we thought in our own little way, this was a very, very big moment. Now, Qantas then found out about this and tried to buy the whole vintage.
For first class.
And James, being the good socialist that he is, wasn't having a bar of it, and stopped it because he wanted all of his,
He wanted everyone to
all of
be
his
able to
clients to
access
enjoy
them,
them.
yeah.
So we're very proud of that project.
Yes. So that was the start of another sort of road in our journey, basically, which brings us to probably the bigger foray into generative, or the biggest that we've done, and talk about making a rod for your own back. Now, rather than having to design one label, we have done 300,000 individual labels, and they're growing. Every year production's going up.
498,000 labels in 2 years.
Yeah, okay. So there you go, and we are outputting each of those labels,
Do you want me to do
which is fun. Yes.
Bruce?
Yep.
Do you want to go to the next one?
I'll go back to why we put that slide in as well.
Okay, so 2015 or 2016. Okay, so Mitchelton, which is I would say quite confidently an iconic wine brand in Australia, or was to a point in time. In 2015, 2016, somewhere around that, 2012, the Ryan family, who own Jayco Caravans, bought Mitchelton. Now, with your interest in graphic design, Mitchelton was a Robin Boyd architecturally designed winery. You need to go and check it out. It's just extraordinary. It's in central Victoria. And Andrew Ryan, who's the son of Jerry, is a dynamic human being, and he, without a doubt, draws the best from us on a daily basis. And that's all about what Andrew was saying about, you know, having clients that can draw the best from you. He came into our little studio and he said, well, I've heard what you're doing with these generative labels. Can you do it? And I said, sure, I can do it. Knowing full well I didn't know what I was saying sure for. And So basically it became the whole basis for the rebranding of Preece, which is their drive line.
Which, for those of you old enough to remember, Preece was once a very iconic brand.
Yeah. So what we did is we took the height of Mitchelton Tower, the physical height. We measured the physical height. We then used Colin Preece's birth date. Then we used a range. So that was our fixed data. We then used a range of variables, which was rainfall, monthly mean temperature, bud burst for raison, harvest, and we delivered these as our starting. So this is the algorithm. So everything we receive is motion or video as our source element. Is that running?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So this one, as opposed to Harewood we used as part of our fixed data, I suppose, was the actual base image that we'd taken from the website. So we had an image. We pushed data through via an algorithm that we'd designed with our wonderful mathematician friend, and basically it manipulated the base image. In this case, we started with, we art directed what we wanted this to look like, and the brief was to ourselves that we wanted it to look non-digitally.
Yeah.
We wanted it to look
So that's
painterly and landscape-like. Yeah. So the colour palette looked natural, even though I think it's a bit of a blend.
So that's about 15, if it's still going. Oh, okay, so that's 15,000 labels. So it's running as a motion file. So then we take that in server and then we hit it with a high-speed camera, and that becomes our assets. There's something I want to say here. Oh yeah, this is important. When we produce this type of work, we are not looking to make it overly hyper-real. So some of the conversations we had when we did Harewood is that we were talking about Goya, we were talking about Michelangelo, we were talking about all of these other Renaissance painters, and we were looking for painterly effects in Harewood. So we're not interested in producing work that, looks like it's in Minority Report. That's not us, okay? So once again, shifting perception and juxtaposition is very important.
And the challenge with doing generative, I think clients do say, but how are you going to do something different for me? If it's generative, am I limited by what that generative design is going to look like? Which, no, it is endless and your options are limitless. It's just up to you as the designer to think about how you want that to be expressed. So this is what Preece looks like now. And yeah, we are very happy with it.
So there's, in anything in life, there is the front and then there's the theatrics. There's the stage and then there's what happens off-site. So this nearly killed us because what we hadn't planned, and I would say it's ignorance on my part, we had not planned the size of servers we would need in order to actually deal with the data. And we actually had a manual process for taking the physical images and then running them as finished artwork in Adobe. These projects take somewhere between 9 to 16 times longer than what it would take if you produced one label. So there is an offset to all of this. It's actually hard labour in the studio to produce these labels. So don't think it's just press a button and nothing in life is just press a button, okay? It's hard labour.
And then getting the terabytes worth of data to the printer,
yeah,
the printer
having
who's
a meltdown.
Never in
any way dealt with anything past about sort of, 10 gig on a USB, and you're just killing their whole sort of, intranet, and it's just disasters everywhere, but it happened. And this won the Dialine Award last year for top 10 most innovative projects, which is a great thing because the wine industry needs this sort of work, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, there's another side point to this, which it gets even freakier. So we produce these labels, client's exceedingly happy. Andrew sort of runs into our studio in a blaze of light, as he normally does, and he says, okay, how do we create an app? And I go, okay, so we've got 498,000 one-off labels. How do you create an app when you actually need one fixed image across the 498,000? So I said, well, I think we should probably just hang ourselves now, Di, because what we've done is created something that we can't produce into a motion or into an app-based environment. So I was looking at this guy's shoes at my local public school and I said, hey man, they are really good looking shoes. And he said, thanks man. And he happened to be friends of some leading app developers. And I said, well, this is my problem. He goes, I got these two guys in Fitzroy, and I reckon if you had a chat to them, they could solve the problem for you. And I was getting out of the tram at about 12:10 on a Friday afternoon, and the two developers called me and they said, oh, we did the app for you. I said, how could you do the app? He said, oh, we did it, we got it to run, and we got it to run on 498,000 labels, one off. And then I just went, label authentication. So we're now talking to Mitchelton about every label being in market, being a navigational marker, and it can be pushing content back to the server with an app. Okay, we've got 5 minutes, we've got to roll.
Okay, so the journey. I'm going to have... Okay, so I think we've touched on all these aspects, apart from the money one, throughout our presentation. Perception, it's something we always like to shift. We don't like to come at things from the predictable position. We like to look at what's being done, look at how it's been approached, and then say, okay, what if we just move it slightly? What can we get? Respect, and I think Andrew touched on it too, don't work for somebody. We have done it many times, and I'm telling you, after
it doesn't work.
Nearly 15 years...
It hurts.
Yeah, it always ends up in disaster. When you don't respect the client or the client doesn't respect you, it's a journey to a horrible end. So you do get that feel. Sometimes it takes a while for you as people to perhaps get to know each other, but I think use your gut and go by gut feel. If you think you can work with someone and you can do something great together, do it. If you think it's not going to work, it usually doesn't. Money.
You want to do money?
You can do money.
Okay. I mean, look, money, and seeing Andrew's presentation today, and money is different things to different people. You've all got to eat, and you've all got to pay your rent, and you've all got to build a legacy, which I think is the beautiful word, legacy. You've all got to do that. However, there are times you're going to have to put a little bit more on the table than take off the table. It's important. Nothing you saw in our presentation today came with us looking at the figures down to the nth degree. You wouldn't have seen any of that work. It wouldn't have happened. The amount of times with priests, when we were working that generative process, the amount of businesses that weren't interested in it, and we just kept spending a little bit of our monthly expenses on building deeper generative engines and all of these other things, you just wouldn't have seen the work. So I think it's a balance, but you have to be able to offset it against what you want to achieve as a human being. Enjoyment?
And enjoyment, I think if you do choose this as your journey, designer, developer, whatever, you have to enjoy what you do. And I always think what we do is an actual privilege, because we're not getting up every morning doing the same thing, doing something meaningless. You can make it mean to you, whatever you want it to mean, but I really believe that we should all be very grateful for what we do and the fact that we can design, and that I think we're more appreciated as as thinkers now than probably ever before. So I think you're in a great time.
Makes you feel good.
Yeah, you can just look at this slide.
So 2 slides to go, and they're probably our most important slides. So the future for us, if Di's brave enough, she's going to tackle a PhD in generative components, if you're brave enough.
If they accept my reason for doing
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Di is now learning Cinema Max as part of a new skill set. I'm learning Max MSP. Just write the word down. Any graphic designer or anyone interested in visual narrative or oral narrative, if you're not looking at Max, Max is incredible, and it's free open source software. Max has a new subtitle to its brand. It says "Control Everything," and I love that idea. And we might just go to our mentor page. Oh no, this is a job we're just about to do. So this is the reimagining of priests at the moment. This is Andreas, and this will give you an idea of what it could look like. This is just a little audio visual from a gig in...
It's on.
Is it?
Yep.
Ah, beautiful.
I don't think So this is where we want to take priests. We've worked with Andreas previously.
We even get the sound.
We have got the sound. we worked with him, I think, on our very first generative project, which we didn't include, which was for a superannuation company. This is how we would like to further develop Priest, that it becomes a dimensional. I think at the moment we've got landscape, but we
need to make it bigger. It needs to become its own world.
And this will become environmental graphics. That's the next stage. So either via VR, in-app, in-browser, or at the actual place at Mitchelton.
So the dream for us is that as you walk through Mitchelton, you'll actually activate a little bit of motion sensor, which will actually generate one label. So killing ourselves out of a job.
Yeah, so that's the ultimate with Priest is that people, all of you can get online, put your data in, and output your own personal labels as part of it as well. So that's something we've been sort of hinting to the client to do for quite a while. And they will, yes.
So respect where respect is required. These are the people that have been part of our journey for many years. Brian Sadgrove, who I don't know how to talk about him.
Who designed the original Priest label.
Yeah, who happened to design the original Priest label. He is a modernist graphic designer of fierce power, and he doesn't suffer fools. Fernando Gutierrez, who's an ex-Pentagram partner who we stalked in London and forced him to have lunch with us, and we ended up becoming best friends with him. He's been instrumental in our work. We said, do you want to come out to Australia for a week and show your work in Pran in a gallery? He said, sure, why not? And so he showed all his work, and so you've got the Design Museum, you've got Prado, you've got, where does it go? Telmo Rodriguez, it goes El Paz. He was art directing a magazine every week, 36-something pages. Ray Parslow, who we've talked about affectionately, one of the great gentlemen of graphic design. Andreas Nicholas Fischer, who we've just started to engage again with, which is the work you just saw, and we're totally stoked about that. And our dear lovely friend in Canberra, who just got totally overwhelmed the day we called him, and we said, could you do this? And he shakily said... I don't want to do it anymore. He said shakily yes. We just want to show respect to our journey. So thank you very much for your time. Enjoy your day.